My Schizophrenic Life, The True Story of Tracy Poe, Part 13, Father's House, Chapter 54, Father's House. This was in October. I had been sneaking out after my father went to sleep and buying a six-pack of beer to drink, but once I became saturated with antipsychotic medication, I no longer needed to self-medicate. And by the end of October in 2000, I had quit drinking alcohol completely, and to this day I do not drink. My father took me to the Social Security office to file for a disability. We then got a letter in the mail from the Social Security Administration that had to be filled out by a licensed doctor. My father took the letter to the psychiatrist I had seen, and she said it was $350 for her to fill it out. My father paid for it. My father asked me if I owed any money on my credit cards, and I said no because I had money in the bank to pay the bills for a while. 6 months later, I was granted a Social Security disability payment each month. I had no bills to pay living at my father's house, so I was able to pay off all my credit cards without my father ever having to bail me out. When I first quit my job at the sign company, I needed to get my prescription filled, and my grandmother suggested my father take me to the Veterans Hospital in Houston. My father and I went there, and I registered to get care there. It took 6 months to get into the system for some mental health treatment, but they had a clinic where I could get my prescriptions filled for a low cost. Back in 2000, it was $2 a month for each prescription. I had an appointment with a Dr. Baker in 6 months. While I was waiting, I continued to see the psychiatrist at the private practice in Sugar Land. She changed my medication, and I had to go back to the clinic at the Veterans Hospital and get the new medication filled. When the month's supply of medication was gone, I went back to the Veterans Hospital to get more, and they told me at the pharmacy that they could give me a few days' worth of meds, but that I needed to fill the prescription by mail by calling in to their automated phone system. So I started doing that. I had a job or was enrolled in college for the last 15 years, and now I had nothing I had to do at my father's house. So I began to draw pictures on Corel Draw. I spent all my time drawing for over a year. I was at my father's house when the attacks of 9/11 took place, and I remember waking up and seeing the World Trade Center on fire on the television. I had saved some money, and in 2002, I bought my father a new computer when his computer gave out. I got him a Sony Vaio, and a few months later, I got an iMac. I threw away my old computer because it had been used to look at adult materials, and Randall and Susan had been on it. I did not trust it. Since this first computer, none of my computers or electronic devices have ever had adult materials on them. I got Adobe Illustrator for my iMac and learned to draw on it. I used it frequently, but never liked it as much as Corel Draw. I met a guy on America Online named Jesse, and he introduced me to PaintShop Pro, which is a graphic arts program that the industry hates because it is used a lot in copyright infringement. On America Online, there were PaintShop Pro, PSP groups that sent out other people's art with the images cut out and on transparent backgrounds so that people could use this art in their own collages. The PSP communities called this stolen art that was manipulated into contemporary designs tags, and they made them for each other, usually with the person's name on it for which it was made. I did this for a while but never liked it as much as Corel Draw. I had brought my cat Brindle to my father's house. Then one day in winter, a calico cat showed up on my father's back porch to sleep on his blanket that he kept in his chair out there. I adopted this cat and named her Cat Ums. My father did not like that Cat Ums took over when she moved in. I had to get Brindle a separate litter box because she would not share with Cat Ums. I took my medication and never missed. I took Seroquel, but it never totally alleviated all my symptoms. I would still see the little girl occasionally, and there was a man in my father's kitchen that I saw also. I no longer heard the warning danger voices, but still, on occasion, would hear the weather radio mumbling voices. I had been seeing Dr. Baker for 3 years now at the Veterans Hospital in Houston. In 2003, I started going to group therapy and was in a thought disorder group of veterans with mainly schizophrenia like I had. It made me open up about my schizophrenia a lot more being in a group with people like me. Chapter 55, Restaurants. People in Sugar Land were still trying to poison me, and I was convinced they were coming into my father's home when we were gone. When my father and I would go to restaurants, strange things would happen. We went to a Chinese buffet, and the old Chinese lady was chatty with her husband when I walked in with my father. I heard the man say, "Yes, in the drink," a few times. I did not drink the tea they brought me. It had 2 lemons in it, and my father's tea had 1 lemon in it. A young man from the back came out and asked me how I felt. It was strange, and I think they were trying to poison me, but I did not drink anything while I was there. Then at a Mexican food place, a young man filled up my father's tea. Then a young lady took the half-full pitcher from him and said, "Let me get some more tea." Then another young lady produced a whole other pitcher of tea, and I said I did not want any tea. One of the young ladies involved in all this then cleared her throat like others had done in the past. The manager then came out and he said something about the tea. I told my father, "See, they would not give me the same tea as you." But he tried to explain it away by saying they were just trying to give good service. I know they were trying to poison me. This happened at most restaurants in Sugar Land. The only restaurant I liked to go to was Lou B's, because you could see them dish out the food from communal trays and you got your own drink from the beverage station. My father wanted me to get better, so he would make me go to restaurants by myself. So I would drive up the freeway out of Sugar Land and go to a big Vietnamese restaurant and eat there, and nothing unusual ever happened there. I also went to a Thai restaurant up the freeway, and nothing unusual ever happened there either. One day, at my father's house, there was a knock at the door, and when I answered, there was a Sugar Land police officer there with a shotgun. He said that someone with a gun was held up in a house a few houses over, and the police officer went through my father's house and positioned himself outside the gate my father had made in the fence to get to the field behind him, which was an access way for the large power lines. The voices told me that this had to do with me. I believe them, because on the map it looks like the road in front of my father's house goes through to the neighborhood to the right as you exit my father's house. The map shows that this is an open street, but it is blocked off. Someone looking at the map would think that the easiest way to get to my father's house would be to go down this back road, but you can't get through there, and it ends 2 houses over. I think someone was trying to get to me and went to the wrong house when they hit the dead end. Otherwise, why would the police officer come to my father's house and not the house next door, which was next to the house that the gunman was in? Chapter 56, Leathercrafts. In 2004, I got the Lord of the Rings trilogy on compact disc and watched it for about 8 months repeatedly. I started making moccasins out of deer leather and doing beadwork on them and giving them to my relatives. I mailed them to the relatives that lived out of the state. I would sit and stitch the deerskin leather with Glover leather stitching needles that have a triangular blade on them to cut through soft leathers. I do not know how many times I watched all 3 movies of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I made moccasins for most of my aunts, uncles, and cousins in Florida and Tennessee. I made my father's lady friend a pair. She was his bowling partner in a bowling league he played in. I made a lot of moccasins. I made 4 large beaded panels for a Native American-style war shirt that were 4 inches wide and 24 inches long with a traditional Native American design on them. They were leather-backed and had the beads lazy-stitched directly on the deerskin panels. I also made 2 bison headdresses with real bison horns. I had gotten a damaged bison hide with winter fur and was able to patch together enough of it to make the 2 headdresses. I sold the war shirt beaded panels and bison headdresses on eBay. Chapter 57, Father's Cancer. Early 2005, my father was diagnosed with lymphoma and began treatment. He began chemotherapy for it at MD Anderson Hospital. Within a few months, he was later diagnosed with leukemia. My brother and sister-in-law helped get him to most of his appointments and treatments, but I also took him on several occasions. One time, we were at the hospital for 16 hours, and they ended up admitting him to stay a few days. I was taking Seroquel and risperidone as prescribed by Dr. Baker at the Veterans Hospital. This drug combination made me very sleepy. I took them both twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. When I would drive my father to MD Anderson, it was all I could do to stay awake on the way up there. Then I could catch a quick nap in the waiting room. One time they sent him home right away with no treatment. So I asked him if he would drive home, and on the way home, I fell asleep in the passenger seat. He pulled into his garage and was going to leave me there asleep in his expedition, but I woke up when he got out and closed his door. My grandmother came to help my father during this time. At the hospital, I would hear people talking about me, and it would cause me to hear voices even though I was on medication. One time, I was sitting with my grandmother in the cafeteria at MD Anderson, and some guy had just said something about me, and I got paranoid and was hearing voices. And then my grandmother said, "See, there is nothing going on here to be scared of." Her words did not make me feel any better. They made me feel worse. My father went through an intensive round of chemotherapy where he had to stay in a sterile room for about 2 weeks. I visited him a few times during this and could see him through a window. After this treatment, he was tested and he still had signs of leukemia. So, he had to go in as an outpatient for more chemotherapy. He came home from a round of this chemotherapy and was told to go back to the hospital in 2 days. He sat in his chair at his house all day and did not feel good. That night, he could not sit up on his bed, so me and my grandmother called my brother and sister-in-law, and they came over and we called the ambulance. They took him to a different hospital because MD Anderson was full and did a blood transfusion. He had picked up an infection in his arm. He had for weeks now put a do not resuscitate order on his status. He told us that we should have just left him and walked around the block and let him die, but there was no way we could have done that. He said he was ready to die and came home and went into hospice care at his house. The next day, he spent time answering phone calls from all his friends from his life. Most of them were people he knew from his work. He had gotten a job when he was 18 with Trans-Texas Airlines in Arkansas and started on Christmas Day as an agent. He sold tickets, checked in and loaded the luggage and helped board the passengers. He retired from Continental Airlines 47 years later as the duty director. He had kept the same job his whole life. He had numerous acquaintances from work who knew him, and it seemed like they all called him while he was in hospice. He went unconscious the next day and passed away peacefully in the middle of the night the next morning, on November 9th in the year 2005.